Då hälsar vi er hjärtligt välkomna till Svenska kyrkans monter och Människan-scenen här på Bokmässan. Vårt nästa samtal går under rubriken Rätten att vara kall. Och det är Sheila Watt-Cloutier som samtalar med Henrik Grape. Det här samtalet kommer att vara på engelska, så vet ni om det. Give a very big welcome to Sheila Watt-Cloutier and Henrik Grape and a big applause.
Thank you so much. First, I want to take this moment to say that I'm very honored to have you by my side, to have this 20 minutes to talk with you. I have been involved with climate change issues during the last decade, and many of my Canadian friends for years I have asked them, have you seen Sheila? Is she at this conference of parties that we have in the Climate Change Convention? But I never, yes, in Paris, we met very briefly. This book, maybe we should put it there, The Right to be Cold, mirrors very well the struggle I also seen during my times working with climate change. Climate change is not only about science, it's not only about technical solutions or political decisions. If we don't include our value system, our beliefs, our cultural outlook on the world, we will not be able to do the transformation that we so absolutely need, and desperately need, I would say. I found in this book a sister. Actually, I have a sister in your age, and it's easy for me to relate to the northern experience, as I was raised in the northern part of Sweden, and the Sami people, our indigenous people, has always been playing a role in my understanding of the land in the northern part of Sweden. Actually, Church of Sweden have lately started a process to look at our contribution to the colonial behavior against the Sami people during history. I think that Sami and indigenous culture all over the world have a lot to contribute to the problem we are facing today when it comes to climate and sustainable living. I can also see a great interest to look back into the history and the proudness some express when they find some Sami ancestors that has been hidden before them. When I see friends that actually know that they have relatives in the back that has been hidden, that has a Sami background. Last year, when we were in Paris for the meeting, I went to a side event on Arctic, and it was Ségolène Royal, and it was a Norwegian, and it was Ban Ki-moon, and there were pictures of ice and snow, but no people. And I was a bit, I thought that this is not the right picture of the Arctic. Where are the people? Where are the indigenous people? Where are the people living in this? This is their home. Why don't we talk about the people of the Arctic? Do you have any reactions?
Well, I think people tend to talk with what they're comfortable with and what they know. And the Arctic is better known for its wildlife and its ice than its people. And oftentimes it's about the big companies in the world that are marketing their products to sell something romantic about the Arctic. And one of the examples that I often give is, you know, Coca-Cola, for example. The polar bears and the seals are frolicking, drinking Coca-Cola on the ice and snow, but it markets and it sells. But, you know, this is an unlikely partnership because one is lunch. They're not a partner. And so for us to try to put the issues of the human dimension and the human face on the map is a daunting task. It's a very difficult task because people do know the Arctic more for its wildlife and the ice. So my mission for the last 15, 20 years has been precisely that, whether it's on the climate change issues or whether it's on the toxins that ended up being carried by weather patterns into our food chain. We are a people who live at the top of the world, who rely on the ice, the snow, and the well-being of our environment to survive and thrive. And to put that human face on the map, as I say, is a very big task in a world that barely knows who we are, much less the kind of negative impacts globalization is having on our way of life. And even though, for me, as I was growing up, first 10 years of my life traveling only by dog team, today we have come from that ice age to space age in one lifetime practically. And trying to get the world to understand that in one lifetime the changes have been very dramatic and very traumatic, in fact, where we have lots of challenges in our communities, which people have not fully understood the context of why we struggle so much at the human level.
One thing, since I'm a theologian and a minister in Church of Sweden, I would like to have you say something on the spirituality and the spiritual tradition from the Inuit, and what you see in it, and also how can it contribute to this great challenge that we have to transform this to sustainable world.
Right. Well, you know, we are a people that are very connected to the cycles of nature and to the environment. And in that sense, it's a very spiritual connection that we have. That everything on the land and all that is around us teaches us to be the best that we can be as human beings, as spiritual beings. And even though in long time tradition we used to have shamanism, but you know, religion did come in and take away a lot of that powerful spirituality that we had from our traditions. But today the bond that we have with our land and our way of life remains very intact. We have never lost that connection to the spirit of the land and what it teaches us. And often I talk about the issue of not just the technical aspect of hunting. Do we teach our children, you know, to become very proficient providers and natural conservationists? But we're also teaching the very holistic way, the life skills, the character skills that are required not just to survive the ice and snow and the daily challenges of living in that environment, but also to survive the modern day, because the character skills such as respect for one another, respect for the land, respect for all the resources, and to learn how to be patient and courageous and take the right survival-based risks, and to create, develop the sound judgment that one needs, not just to survive the land, but to survive the modern world. And ultimately, in my language, we call silatunik, means wisdom. And so it's rooted, our culture is rooted in developing wisdom for our children, so they may choose what is right for them, so they may respect the nature and all that is around them. And so with that kind of bond, we have that spiritual connection in our culture to all that is around us and to each other, you know, to be inclusive, to be respectful. And it's so when we talk about the ice is leaving, the ice is melting, yes, we worry about that, because for us it's about transportation and mobility. And when that starts to go, it's about safety and security first and foremost. But at the same time, it isn't just about the ice, because as the ice goes, so does the wisdom of the people. And that's the worry that we have. And our young people, we are losing so quickly to suicides and self-destruction as a result of the traumas, the historical traumas that have happened that very few people know about. I've written intensively about some of these things. And so today, you know, we're in this place where we're trying to rebuild back the spirit of the people, because we have become so dispirited as a result of the tumultuous changes that have happened in one lifetime, and the historical traumas that few people know about.
Yes. You also mentioned that when you were sent away to school, you also lost your language.
Yes.
I think that story is very upsetting in some way, to take somebody out of your context. You lose your language, you come back, you have to relearn your language. To me, on a more symbolical level, I may think that all over the world we have lost our language because we have lost our traditions. How do we and the connections? How do we reclaim our language? I mean, you've done it literally, But do you see any possibility that this world, that we can sort of reclaim a language that are inclusive, that are understanding that we are living in under one ecosystem? And
well, that's the message that I'm trying to relay here through my own story, through our own story of the people of the Arctic. You know, we have gone through so much in terms of the changes and the traumas, and now we're fighting for a sustainable way of living that we have always depended upon. And so for me, it's the stories that I'm trying to tell around the world when I speak at these kinds of events and some larger ones is that we're all connected. What happens in the Arctic does not stay in the Arctic. It affects everybody else at every level. You may not see it in the urban setting immediately, but I can guarantee you it will happen, because the Arctic is that cooling system for the planet. It is the health barometer. So whatever happens in the Arctic has negative ramifications elsewhere. And so, yes, in terms of the physical aspect of climate change, it will impact everyone, and it already is. We see the wildfires, much more the droughts, the floods, the tornadoes, the intense hurricanes, because of the breakdown of that cooling system. The air conditioner is breaking down for the planet, which happens to be the ice at the top of the world. And so in that sense, of the physical sense, of course, everything is interconnected. But if we can come to understand that as a people, our common troubled atmosphere, we should be really starting to connect, because we are a common humanity. And in that sense, if we can get the Arctic to, if you can help to understand and better relate what's happening to us rather than othering one another, then I think we have a chance to start to really make an impact in terms of how we have to think differently from me, I, and think about we.
Isn't
as a people,
isn't that a part of the spiritual tradition to think we instead of thinking me?
It is, very much so. And on that human level, because, you know, we've tried, as you mentioned early, the politics, the technology, the science, all of those things that we've tried to address about our environment has not been very successful to date. Even when we get really great leaders elected, they're paralyzed by that me approach.
You've seen that in Canada?
Absolutely.
And
I mean, we have a
Obama
fantastic prime minister who wants to do the right thing, but the provinces have another agenda because of their own economic reasons for status quo. So, you know, we have to pull ourselves out of the same thinking that got us into the trouble in the first place. As Einstein said, and I mentioned this again yesterday, problems cannot be solved by the same mindset that they were created by. So we have to change completely our mindset about what's happening in the Arctic, what's happening to our climate, and think in terms of a collective, that we're all in this together.
But at the same time, you see in the Arctic, you can see it in Sweden, in Norway, you can see it in Canada. As the ice is melting, there are also natural resources that you can sort of take out of. You have mining industry, you have oil, gas industry, and it's so they say to you, we will get you work, you get modernity, you will get great houses, you will get great income if you just exploit this. What is your answer?
Well, the answer, there's a few ideas, and I write about them as well. That's the only carrot that now seems to be dangled in front of people who are desperate for jobs. And it's not helpful to the larger cause, because these companies that have come in and are coming into the Arctic also don't have a very good reputation across the world on indigenous lands. So our question, and my question, would be, are you actually going to reinvent yourselves for the peoples of the Arctic, which you have not proven to have a very good reputation in leaving a huge footprint in other parts of the world, and show us what it is that you're going to be doing that would make it so different for the Arctic. And besides, if you are not going to reinvent yourselves, then you are adding to the very issue that is creating the problems in the Arctic, and that's more greenhouse gas emissions.
Yes.
It's an unsustainable way. So we have to think very differently. We have to go back to the grounding and the foundation that Inuit culture is coming from, and that's using the resources that you need, not being wasteful, and knowing how to sustain long term.
Yeah.
And so it's, in a way, I guess I'm saying that learn from the people who are most negatively impacted. I am not suggesting everybody has to become a hunter and fisher, but reconnect back to nature. That's my message, because nature will tell you what it needs and how we need to come together as that common humanity to address these issues. And the trauma that human communities have gone through, and that's in my recent TED Talk, is connecting that human trauma to the climate trauma that is happening now. Climate is not just changing, it's in trauma. And we have to admit that it's that serious when we see the cycles happening that are so different now, not just in the Arctic, but because we rely so heavily on the ice, the snow, and the cold, we witness the most minute of changes. Yeah. And we're trying to signal to the world, this is what's happening. And this is really a serious issue.
This is really interesting, because when I was in Paris, I went to, before Paris, Church of Sweden, together with the Canadian Council of Churches, we had a conference in northern Sweden on climate change, indigenous people and churches. And there were some people from Canada who actually sort of gathered all the things that they have noticed.
Yes.
But they are not professionals, they are not scientists. But it was like a long list of what actually was happening, and you couldn't be say, oh, maybe it's not that. You can say they're not scientists. And then I went to Paris to the Arctic seminar where you also were speaking, and I heard exactly the same words from a scientific perspective as the indigenous people of Canada told me.
That's right.
So I say it's very secure in one way to listen to indigenous people and vulnerable people around the world, what they are telling, because to me that was a sort of explanation that we cannot wait. We have to listen to this. And also, in World Council of Churches, we have worked together with people from the Pacific. And there is a strong connection with the Pacific and the Arctic.
That's right.
And many people say, it's so different. No, it's not that different.
It's one planet we're on, we have to remember.
It's one planet, but they are also very vulnerable to climate change. And they have less resources, there are not so many people living there, they have no strong voices. And to put them together, and they're often also, when we are looking at TV shows, we see the Pacific as some paradise.
Yes.
And we see the Arctic as the natural resources and so beautiful, but we don't see the people.
Right, exactly.
And so it's so important to get this perspective. And for me, I think indigenous really have to have the voice and also have the sort of prophetic voice to say, this is happening, we have to act now.
Absolutely, because you're exactly right. The Arctic, as it melts, the glaciers that are melting, the Greenland ice sheet that is melting because it's on land, creates a sea level rise in other parts of the world. And so the connection is very clear. And you can't get clearer than that when you see the Arctic melting and the small island Pacific states are sinking. And so that, in fact, some of that work I was involved in when I launched the human rights petition in 2005, citing at the time the Bush administration for not addressing this issue as a human rights issue. We also launched the same time at the Montreal climate talks, the many strong voices, we call them, linking the Arctic vulnerable peoples to the small island developing states and trying to make a difference. But of course, resources are scarce. It's difficult to operate, and try to get those voices heard on that at that level. But you're absolutely right. The connection is very clear and very strong.
We got 1 minute left, or two.
Already?
We have a Paris Agreement. Everybody was happy 1 year ago when we were making a big applause that this is actually happening. But still, there is a lot to do.
There is a lot to do.
Do you have any hope? Do you see any hope?
Well, you know, I wouldn't be in Sweden if I didn't have hope. Every day in my life I have hope because I'm a mother and I'm a grandmother. I'm a grandmother of 2 sons that are growing up in the Arctic where I live in Nunavut. It is for them that I do this work. It is a sense of meaning to this work that I take very seriously, and I take it with a sense of responsibility. But wherever I go, and I talk to people about, you know, coming to common ground as a as a common humanity, and coming to common ground as mothers, as grandmothers, as parents, and as a family, that the future of our children depends on the action or the inaction that the world takes, and that we can't just leave the responsibility up to politicians and economists and scientists. This is our business. This is what we need to do, is to get involved and understand what's happening to the peoples of the Arctic and to the other vulnerable peoples around the world, so that we can make those changes as to what kind of leaders we need negotiating on our behalf at the global scale. And really just come to that common ground, because the other ways that has been tried is not effective enough. I know it's a big task, but it can be done because we're in this together. Yeah. And as I said in my TED talk, we're in this together, and together we've got this. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think we run out of time. I would like to say next time we will have to discuss the roles of the mothers, the ancestors' mothers. They are so important, and also talk some about rock and roll.
Yes, rock and roll.
But it's in the book.
It's in the book.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.